Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to Prince George's County Memorial Library System's teen monthly series Up and Out, where we talk to community members in the queer community or people who are supporting queer teenagers in the LGBTQ plus community. My name is Rebecca Oxley. I am the librarian 3 at the Greenbelt branch. My pronouns are she and they, and I am delighted to have put together a merry band of bisexual folks, people who identify as the B in LGBTQ. And so we are here to discuss bi pride and some bi problems as well. So with that comes the joy. I just want to introduce this wonderful cast of characters we have. Someone who I went to library school with, Margaret Helen. Their pronouns are she and they. Margaret is the middle school teacher librarian in Tacoma, Washington. They're interested in how technology affects equity and access to information and to audiences, especially in education. They have worked with youth from a wide variety of backgrounds and believe that their critical awareness of injustices in public schooling makes them a strong advocate for marginalized youth. Margaret has presented at numerous conferences and co-authored 2 papers published in peer-reviewed journals. And they also support police and immigration reform and voting rights in their spare time, and likes to tell their elected representatives what they think about things. Welcome, Margaret.
Thank you. My cat is also here.
What?
He sits hi.
Hilo?
This is Nathan.
Nathan. It's Nathan. Nathan's pulling through. God love him. I'm also very excited to welcome my friend Small Smalley. Their pronouns are they and them. They are a direct support specialist at WOW in Sync in the greater Atlanta area. They are previously from the Rochester area. And there they plan and implement recreational and volunteer opportunities for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They've worked in many roles through the years, supporting people with disabilities and connecting them with fun, friends, and community. Smalley graduated with a degree in music and also teaches music lessons part-time. In their spare time, they also enjoy writing and performing songs. I'm a huge fan of their anime covers on ukulele, and it's not marimba, it's a xylophone, I think.
It's actually a vibraphone, and it's right back here if you want to take a look at it.
Super smooth,
yeah.
Super sweet. They hike, bike, read, learn American Sign Language, and just being queer, which is great. Welcome, Smalls.
Thank you very much.
Last but certainly not least is my new pandemic friend, Kayla Martin Gant. Her pronouns are she and her. She is the continuing education coordinator at the Mississippi Library Commission. She has a bachelor's in English Lit from Belhaven University, got her MLIS online at the University of Southern Mississippi. Prior to working at the Library Commission, she was a public librarian at Brandon Public Libraries for 6 years. As a teen librarian and then as reference and genealogy supervisor. She, like me, is married to somebody who identifies as cis opposite sex. So I'm sure we'll unpack that a little bit. And has a very cute little gremlin of a dog named Roman. She is also a podcast monster, particularly for horrors. And she also has chronic migraines and ADHD. Welcome, Kayla.
Hi.
All right. Well, I guess we will just kind of do a round robin. I had some questions that I know that we all contributed to, so that we can just talk about bi joy and obstacles that we find in our lives. So how old were you when you started to self-actualize your sexuality and your gender identity? And when were you able to start really living your truth? How has that enriched your life? Let's start with Margaret.
Yeah, so this has kind of been a recent thing for me. I think for most of my life, I didn't really have access to the concept of non-binary genders. And so when I was introduced to them, I felt like I was really settled in my gender identity, and it took a long time. It was actually, I had a student who was non-binary, and I remember having the thought one day when I was talking to them that I wish that had been a thing when I was growing up. And then, like, you know, I'm not dead. It's not over.
Right.
So it took a couple of years, but I finally got to the point where I was like comfortable claiming that identity maybe a year and a half or so ago, and started telling people about it. And it's very clear to me that it's not like a thing that just happens, you know, like this is who I've been my whole life. It's kind of having the language and the concepts to explain what that is has been, you know, has kind of given me access to like an understanding of myself that I didn't have before. And the way I've described it to folks is like, it's like if you're taking off some really uncomfortable shoes, but you've been wearing them all day, so you like stopped noticing how uncomfortable they were, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, my feet can breathe. That's the feeling that gave me, like kind of just being able to say like, no, this is like who I really am. And I did a lot of like, you know, why do I need to make this a thing in my life that's like a big upheaval? And I mean, it just comes back to like, it just feels honest and truthful. And I think that's just so important. And so that has in turn made me kind of think about, like, I've sort of been very low key about being bi for most of my life. Like I've been shy about claiming that too, because I've mostly dated men. And it's like, if this isn't, again, like, why do I need to make a big deal about it just because it's me being my authentic self? That's not important, you know? So now I'm starting to kind of come to grips with like, that is important. And it's important for me to be able to be honest with the people in my life and explore this part of myself. So anyway, so that's kind of where I'm at right now, is just in this place of like uncertainty, but in a good way, where I'm opening myself up to possibilities that I wasn't before. So yeah.
I could definitely vibe with that. Smalls, do you have a comment to share about that?
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about my experience a little bit. You know, not all, I mean, I'm trans, I'm non-binary. I consider myself to fall under the trans umbrella. I consider myself to be trans-masculine. So there's some stuff going on there with gender, but so I mean, I know not all trans people like have this like realization when they're really young. Some people find out later, and it's different for everyone. But for me, it was like, I've pretty much known this my entire life. Like it started out when I was really young. I think I must have been like, you know, like kindergarten-ish, and my friends and I would like be playing in the yard. We'd be playing like role-playing type games, you know, like house, and like pretending to be characters from different movies and stuff. And I would be like, well, I want to be the dog. And my mom was like, you can't be a dog, you're a human. Like, this isn't right. And I'm like, because for me, it was like none of those things really fit. So I was like, I'm just going to be the dog. I vibe with the dog. You know, and I just had these dreams where I remember this really vivid dream when I was like 5 years old. I just like looked in the mirror and I had like this short haircut, and I was like, yeah, I'm a boy right now. And like there was like triceratops randomly, I don't know why, but like it was very real for me from a very young age. And then, you know, that just kind of continued on throughout my life, and I felt like the pressure of gender being put on me more and more and more. I just kept fighting back with like, no, I'm just a tomboy, or no, I like all these guy things. And, you know, it's a lot of internalized misogyny with that. I don't have time right now to unpack all that. But for me, I was also like the whole, like my relationship with gender kind of like goes hand in hand with my bisexuality, because I have a very fluid relationship with gender as it is. So it wasn't that hard for me to like go from that to being like, well, you know, if my gender is not fitting into this binary system, then like, why should my feelings about other people fit into that, you know? So, I mean, I realized when I probably about like puberty, you know, like in high school, my friends and I, like you know, I'm AFAB, I'm assigned female at birth. So I lived a lot of my life with that kind of assumption being put on me. And a lot of my friends, you know, who were girls, like we would flirt with each other. I mean, we went at this, like, some of these things like were happening, and I don't even talk to any of those people now, but I'd be really surprised if they didn't turn out to be, at least some of them, queer.
A little gay. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, obviously I explored that a lot in high school or in college. I had a close friend in my sophomore year of college who came out as a trans man. And I like really identified with that. And I was like, really kind of like, well, why do I identify with this so much? I'm not a man. But like, I'm as close as you can get to being a man without getting your eyes wet, you know, like the old Greg thing, as close as you can get to Bailey's without getting your eyes wet. Yeah. And then, you know, I like in college, I think that's when I started really being like, yeah, I'm bi. And now I'm kind of like really aggressively out about it. I just tell everyone I know. Because I just want them to know. I feel like it's important and I want them to know. I'm like, hey, that girl over there looks cute. Hey, that guy over there is cute. Hey, I would date her. Ooh, you see this mannequin? That's my new girlfriend. Like, I just make it obvious.
Thanks for sharing that. I can definitely understand what you're saying. When I was a little girl, I desperately wanted to be a boy. I rejected pretty much everything that was girly, although I did love like She-Ra, My Little Pony, and you know, Rainbow Bright and stuff like that. But they were all like very, you know, powerful and cool. At any rate, I actually wrote an essay, which a teacher passed to my mother and said they were very concerned about me because they asked what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I wrote about how I wanted to be a boy because I wanted to play for a Major League Baseball team. And I would have to be a boy to do that. And clearly it just made sense because everything else about me just went along more with boys. In high school, I, you know, kind of vacillated between like a more femme presenting, but, you know, it was the 90s. So you could be pretty androgynous and get away with it. I definitely got called out in the locker room. There's a boy in here. And I'm like, no, I can be in here, you know, or had some kids try to jump me one time thinking I was some kid. And then I was like, no, I'm not even a boy. So you got the wrong person. But now that I'm older, I feel very comfortable in my femme identity. And I added they them pronouns just this past year because I was like, this makes sense. And I don't have to explain it to anybody if I don't want to. And I've known I was bi since I was probably 6 years old. I just knew that I really liked boys and I really liked girls. Then I got older and was like, I really like these people who are genderqueer also. You know, I like all the people. This is fantastic. Part of me sticks with the bisexuality instead of I am pan-romantic, but I like representing the B in the LGBTQ because it was just such a hard one position, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about. But let me not sidetrack us. Kayla, I'd love to hear from you.
So like, I have trouble explaining this because like I've always been kind of a late bloomer, like in every regard. I have a lot of trouble sometimes like understanding and navigating my own emotions and in turn like what I'm actually thinking. And I've done many a like long-winded Twitter thread about this. But so like even when I was I think I knew subconsciously when I was a kid that like I wasn't just like a straight kid, but I always like, do y'all ever get like that where it's like you think about it so much that then you just kind of talk yourself in circles, and then like you have to step back and be like, if you were straight you probably wouldn't be thinking about it this much. Yeah, it's kind of like when, you know, you realize like you have ADHD or something. It's like people who don't have like ADHD don't constantly wonder if they do based on X, Y, Z, and a million other things. But like, I grew up in like super rural Oklahoma and then in suburban Mississippi. And like my parents have always been pretty chill about like everything, but in that way, like, so I didn't really get like a lot of, you know, like negative feedback from them in that regard. But the thing is that I didn't really get like any. We just didn't, you know, we talked about a lot of stuff, but we didn't necessarily talk about anything like that or explore anything like that. And you know, I grew up in my formative years were like the early aughts where, you know, everything like dumb that you hated was gay. And so like you had to, and also like, you know, here in the suburban South, like I've always also been like a fat kid and also kind of had my weird awkward phases. And when you are not skinny and not necessarily like super popular just because, you know, you're kind of awkward and like you don't know how to communicate with people, then like any kind of physical contact you have with people like kind of comes under scrutiny. And so like I never felt comfortable thinking about it or, you know, anything because I was like, you know, oh. And also like I kind of didn't want to, like I've also realized in the past year, like I'm also kind of on the A spectrum. So, and I'm 32 for context, so a little late on that, but you know, not too late, it's okay. But like all that to say, I never really dated, you know, I never really like went out, and I always just kind of wanted to sit at home and read. And that was like literally all I wanted to do ever. I liked to hibernate, I still do. And you know, I've been married for 4 years now, and we've been together like 9. And he's actually like really the first person I dated, which isn't to say I dated him and like that was one person and I was like, okay, you're it, we're married now. It just kind of happened to shake out that way. Mm-hmm. But like, yeah, so all that to say, there's a lot of things looking back now that I'm like, honey, how did you not know that about yourself? Like, nobody likes Xena that much, kid. Like, calm down. But yeah, it wasn't until I was like probably 20 or so that I was like, hey, perhaps. And then it really got annoying because I would have friends that would be like, yeah, we know. And I'm like, okay, can you just pretend for a minute? Like, don't, thanks. So yeah, okay, sorry, I'll shut up now.
Oh, that's great. I think it's really wonderful that we've had all these responses because it really helps our viewers to understand that you can realize things about your sexuality and or gender throughout your life. And those things are not necessarily static. There is the view that, okay, you've always actually been this way. And then there's some other people who are like, well, I was this and now I'm this, and that's okay too. It's all pretty much all good in the queer community. So because I'm going to be mindful of our time, I'm going to possibly skip around a little bit. One thing I want to talk about there's a lot of stereotypes about the bi community. Now, some of them are kind of fun, like we roll up our jeans and we like iced coffee and we like bisexual lighting. We love our pride colors.
We sit like this.
We sit really strangely and we eat hot chip. You know,
and like, lie.
Right, and lie.
Yes. I do eat hot chip and lie. That's no.
I eat hot chip and lie down. Like, yeah, that's sort of being bi and chronically ill. So like.
And then for the viewers at home, that's the most basic bi right there. It gets a lot freakier than that. But you know, some of these stereotypes are harmless. Others can be very damaging. So are there any common stereotypes that you feel you fall into? And you know, how has that been for you, Margaret?
Yeah, so that's a tough, this is one I thought about a lot. And I don't think it's something that's ever, you know, like been directed at me. But I think those stereotypes are something that I'm aware of. And particularly like the whole question of, people who aren't really bisexual, they just,
Mhm.
I think that particular line of thinking. So I want to complete the thought. So the stereotype I'm talking about is like the idea that people who say they're bi aren't really bi. They're just like kind of taking a vacation from being straight. And it's like, that's so condescending. But I think it also made me really reluctant. Like that was part of why I was reluctant to claim that label for so long, even though I've known that I was attracted to women and men for, at least since college. And like, yeah, so I don't know. So I think that's kind of how it's played a role in my life. And it's something like, as I said, I'm kind of just really starting to be out about. So
for sure. And, you get that pressure from the straight crowd, right? Like even the term bi-curious is sort of kind of silly because it's like, you're probably just queer, but you know what? That's not for me to decide. You get to identify how you identify. But I definitely when I went to college, especially, and I found a whole lot of queer people my age, and we're all trying to convince me, no, you're really a lesbian and you just don't know it yet. I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're wrong, but you could think that if you want to. So, and I definitely have yeeted people right off my friends list for saying, oh, how can you celebrate being bi? You're married to a man. My husband and I have been together for 20 years, 20 wonderful years. And because, he's a very, cis male identifying person, people just automatically assume that I'm straight. I know that when I was in certain schools, I could be out. And in other schools, I sort of had to masquerade as a straight person to get by, which was really annoying. Smalls, do you want to add to the conversation?
Well, I was actually just kind of like thinking about these questions last night with my partner. And I want to bring in like my partner is a cis man also. So I get a lot of this kind of thing that you guys are talking about, even though I'm trans masculine myself. So like, if anything, it should be seen as homosexual-ish, but yeah, it's not because people don't see me as what I really am. He was like talking about like, because there's, for people who are like female or like people who are perceived as female, it's always this well, you're really just straight and you're just putting on a performance for people, at least in like the straight community. Like you're trying to get attention from guys and stuff. So like,
right. Growing up, what it comes down to is getting attention from dudes.
It's always just like this very like,
even if there were no dudes there at the time, it was still about,
if you're a lesbian, that just means you haven't met the right man, right?
How can practicing happen that doesn't center the male gaze, guys? I don't understand it.
That's the tea.
You're practicing for when you do happen to fall upon a man standing there, so that you can kiss in front of him, right? I guess. But yeah, so like But growing up, I always had this like perception of myself. I was like, well, I like girls, but like I really like dudes. So like I guess I'm straight. I don't know. Like I didn't really like understand it. I was like, and then like my partner had like the opposite reaction, where like as soon as he realized he liked guys, he was like, am I gay? Oh my God. Like I can't be gay. I like girls. I like women. And it was like, so, this kind of conversation we had happened. It's so messed up. And like to this day, like still has a lot of that experience where people are like, oh, you're really just gay. And like in the queer community, especially, like a lot of our gay friends continue to have this sort of like attack on him where they're like, you're just gay and you don't want to admit it. And then, and then there's also like, I think in the queer community, especially, there's this idea of like duplicitousness. Because like a lot of times when I'm in queer circles, I'm like, yeah, I'm bi. And everyone's like, well, how does your partner feel about that? And I'm like, my partner's bi too. And we both love it. It's great.
Checkmate, gatekeepers.
We get to have a crush on the same people. It's amazing.
So that made me think of something else that annoys me too, if I can jump in. I know, Kayla, you haven't had a chance to speak on this yet.
Don't worry, because I never shut up, so it's fine.
Okay. But just that idea that like bi people can't be satisfied by one partner who is only of one gender. Like, do we, I don't get it. Like how can you, is it like that you think you have to have sex with everybody that you're attracted to?
That's what people seem to think. It's
but only if you're bi.
Yeah, like my mom, she has like, she's learned so much, but I've got to tell you this story because like, it's incredible. So my one experience that I've had with therapy, the therapist was garbage. And I went for like a day and I was like, no, thank you. And yeah, don't worry, I'll like hop on that eventually. I'm a grown up now. I pay taxes and stuff. But like, I keep having to reassure myself of that. But so that was when I was like 18 or 19. And I remember sitting in like the office with my mom filling out the paperwork and hover for like 2.5 solid noticeable minutes, hovering over the sexual orientation box. Like, what one am I supposed to check? And so then later, like, you know, afterward we were out and she was like, you know, you can like tell me stuff. And I was going, And so eventually we kind of had a conversation and I, you know, said, yeah, I think I'm bi, whatever. And she was like, this is the first part of the story. I promise I'll go quickly, but like it needs 2 parts for like the oomph. So like, then she kept asking me like, you know, well, how do you know if you've never dated a woman? And I was like, it's not a Sam's Club sample stand. Like you can know even if you haven't had it. Like, I promise. And she was like, but how do you know? And I was like, okay, did you know you liked dudes before you dated a dude? And she was like, yeah, but it's not the same. I was like, it's exactly the same. That's the point. So but it was so funny because literally for the rest of the afternoon, she would like walk out of my room, like, okay, you know, we would have the conversation, we'd be done. And she'd walk out of my room. And then like 10 minutes later, she'd come scooting back in with another question. And it would have been adorable if it hadn't been like already one of the crappiest days I'd had in a long time. So then cut to almost 10 years later, like right before my wedding, like a week before, I tell her, hey, I want to tell dad. She had always said like, hey, maybe don't talk, you know, necessarily to your dad about that unless it like comes up because, you know, you're gonna like, you know, date somebody, just because she didn't know how he would react because he never really talked about stuff. And like his, you know, like I had a cousin who is gay and he's one of the only ones in that side of the family we could stand to be around for more than 5 minutes at a time. So, you know, I mean, that was promising, but like, I know, you know, some things are different when they're your kid. Right. And so, you know, I just didn't want to like, it was whatever. And so I told her, you know, hey, you know, I want to tell dad, like, I don't know. I feel like I want to. And this was over the phone. And she's like, there's this a long pause. And she's like, is that going to continue into your marriage? And I was like, oh no, it gets better. It gets so much better. And she repeated herself. And I was like, are you asking me if I'm going to sleep with other people after I'm married because I'm bisexual? And she was like, yeah. I said, no. I said, just so we're clear, like bisexual doesn't equate to polyamorous. Like it doesn't, I don't like, no. No, I don't really like many people to begin with. And right now I really only like this one person. That's kind of why we're getting married. So like, no, I'm good. And we kind of went back and forth and she was going, well, you know, you've never actually dated a woman, have you? And I was like, well, I've pretty much dated nobody except for like one dude for a week because he kissed me at a New Year's party when I was 20. So I thought I should try this out. And then it turns out he was both boring and obnoxious. So and like super clingy. So after a week that was done. So, you know, no. And she was like, well, how do you know? And like, Becca, you may need to cut this out, but I do need to tell them that I was like, okay, how many boobs do you have to touch in order to know that you like doing that? Like, is there like a set number? Do you want me to give you an itemized list? She was like, no, I'm good. So
I think that's a legitimate question because, you know, for our viewers out there, it can be a little intimidating at first to kind of own your own sexuality, especially if you, no matter who you are, but definitely, you know, we're speaking from the bi experience, because there's this concept of bi-erasure, which is just that, oh no, you're just really straight, or no, you're just really gay, and there is no bisexuality, or the assumption that all bisexuals are selfish, and the fact that there are plenty of bisexual poly people out there, having really healthy, fulfilling relationships with different people that they care about, and that doesn't make them promiscuous or selfish or self-absorbed. So there's a lot of different ways that, you know, you can express your bi-ness. I'm glad that we kind of talked about biphobia also. Like, people really just are so scared of the love or the gender identity of other people, even though it threatens nothing. That's a big part of what we experience as well.
I do want to say one thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It threatens the binary. It subverts the binary.
Yeah.
Hint. That's why people don't like it.
I would like to go along with Baby Got Mick on that one and crash the system, CIS system.
Well, I mean, no, it's true though, because like if suddenly there's, you know, more than one gender, and you can, or more than two genders, my bad.
There's only one gender.
You just told on yourself.
There can only be one. It's, like, yeah, and then gender is Christopher Lambert. Yeah. But no, like, no, if there's more than two, and you can like, you know, more than two, then like, what else does that mean? Does that mean like, perhaps like, you know, this whole thing that we have set up where like cis dudes at the very top of it are, maybe that is not like necessary? Which, by the way, this is not me like trying to crap all over cisgender dudes. I'm married to one, obviously, like some of them are pretty all right. But like, you know, it's a thing that is true in all kinds of difficult conversations and like discourse with a capital D, where people who don't necessarily have to deal with this because they don't identify that way, they don't understand those feelings, so they've never had to approach that. It is much easier to just assume that people around them are lying than it is to have to like readjust their entire worldview. And I get it, it's difficult, but like, please suck it up, because we got stuff to do. But no, just really quickly about like the stereotype thing. The thing about that is like, stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason. And, you know, some of us really like, that's just who we are. That's, you know, it's a commonality, you know, that a lot of us have.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with, you know, being an example of that stereotype. The problem obviously becomes when that stereotype is the only, you know, shade of that flavor of person that you have, and then it gets exaggerated to caricature levels. But that's such a problem then too, especially in the queer community, because then it's like, you know, you're not a good enough, you know, bisexual or a good enough gay or a good enough whatever if you don't, you know, check these specific like, you know, weird aesthetic boxes and stuff. But also at the same time, you actively don't want to do that because you don't want to be a stereotype. And it's like,
right.
Just let people be themselves. It's not that hard. I promise.
Yeah, I think the part of this panel is to show that bisexual people are not a monolith. We're so vastly different, just like every other group. But this is a great segue actually to talk about the leftover misperception that bisexuality equals gender binary, that because it's called bisexual, bi meaning two, like, thank you for queer splaining to me. But let's set the record straight. How has the concept of bisexuality, in your opinion, evolved with the changing community? Margaret, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I think I used to think about bisexual as being attracted to both men and women, but at least for me, like I said, you know, I've known about trans people for a long time, but the idea that you could just not pick, you know, a side was new for me in the last like decade or so. And you know, when I really think about this, I think for me, I just kind of don't really think gender is this super, like, it's not, I don't think we need to define it and worry about it. I think it's really cool that we have these different ways of expressing our identities to draw on. And I love being non-binary because I can pull from both of those, and I'm straying off topic. Okay, so I'm going to bring myself back.
It's very relevant.
But I think, you know, when I started thinking about myself that way, I was like, well, okay. I mean, I've really been much more interested in and like feeling more of an affinity and attraction for people who also identify as non-binary recently. Just because I think it's so like fun and cool and neat not to be, you know, stuck in a little box where you have to act a certain way and do certain things and order to convince people that you are the right gender. I don't know. But yeah, so I think now I think about it more as like bi really just is an identity that's not tied to those. I mean, yeah, so like you can be attracted to whoever you want, right? And whatever gender they are, and that's cool.
Right. You know, another question that was in our list was, well, you know, what's the difference between bi and pan? Well, the answer is not a lot. A flag, a color scheme, that makes us different. But they're just two slightly different ways of thinking about the same thing. I was in a training sometime last year, and the person described bisexuals as people who were either attracted to men or women. And there was a bit of back and forth about, you know, the definition of bisexual is you're attracted to your own gender, whatever that is, and other genders. And just for the folks at home, pansexuals define themselves as being attracted to people regardless of gender. So they're kind of on the same coin, two sides of the same coin, but they're just a little bit different. Smalls, did you want to talk about the gender binary? Because I know you've you know, recently had a really personal, really wonderful experience, been keeping up with your clippings on social media, and super proud of you. So I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Yeah, well, you know, so I think that like that's something that I kind of noticed when I was like looking at this topic. I was like, I want to like narrow it down, like the history of bisexual. Like, was it always just thought of like, or did it start out this way or whatever? And like, you know, in like a lot of stuff I found, like from like all the way from like the 60s to the 90s, like the way that people were talking about bisexuality was like kind of the same as like how they talk about pansexuality. They were like saying, oh, it's an attraction regardless of gender, or oh, you know, it's an attraction to the person, not the gender, or like it's an attraction that transcends gender. And these were all people talking about bisexuality like several decades ago. So I think that just has now, you know, now we're having this like back and forth about like, oh, bisexuality is this thing and pansexuality is this thing. It's like those two terms are largely how you define them yourself. And, you know, I have a lot of reasons for wanting to be bi. You know, I mean, part of it is like, part of it is a little bit in the semantics, because a lot of people talk about attraction regardless of gender, but it's like, no, my attraction has a lot to do with gender. It's just that I'm attracted to all of them.
Oh, gender is great. It's gender roles and gender nonsense that's the problem. Like,
it's when gender is confining instead of like freeing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Like, you know, this like bi anxiety, although that's another stereotype of bisexuals. Oh, they're super anxious. But with that, I think comes a lot of bi joy, dash joy, in terms of sort of being like an act of resistance, like, hi, I exist. I refuse to not take up space or be quiet. I'm just going to live my life, and let, you know, in my case, you know, as a librarian, there are 3 librarians on this panel. We're just going to let the younger generations know that we're here, we're queer, and we're open to supporting you no matter who you are, straight kid or queer kid or questioning kid, or just kind of wants to opt out of gender or sexuality altogether. You know, you're welcome, and we will do what we can to help you thrive. I'm just going to skip down a little bit because I know we have about 15, 20 minutes left. So I wanted to talk about, has your bisexuality had an effect on your relationship with gender or vice versa? And I want to open that up to Smalls to start off that conversation.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, non-binary, transmasculine. And I feel like that kind of like going back to like me discovering that that was who I was as a person, and like not having, I kind of like what Margaret was saying about like not having the words for it, or like not knowing that that was a thing. But like, even if you don't know it, it's a thing, it's still like once you realize it, it's still a part of you. You just don't have a way to describe that. So, you know, I like my feelings were always kind of informed by that, you know. So like bisexuality to me was never about like, yeah, I mean, men and women, both of them. It was always just like, whatever it is, I like it, you know. And it was, and like I experimented a lot with my gender, especially in college. And I had a boyfriend at the time who there's this really great picture of us where I'm wearing like a blazer. I'm wearing like a blazer and this hat, and he's like wearing his mother's like old Christmas themed lingerie. And looking fabulous, by the way, like looking amazing. And we would regularly do this. Like this was a thing we would do on a regular basis. It's like we would raid each other's closets and like wear each other's clothes and like play around with like gender stereotypes in our relationships. And I would, you know, like I would be, you know, doing something that the man is supposed to do. You know, I'd be carrying something heavy and he'd go, can you help me? You know, like we would do, like we would play around with all this stuff. And you know, I just like having that like in a romantic relationship really kind of opened my eyes to like, okay, like we're both engaging in this like really wonky area of gender. So like it's pretty clear to me that that's like, you know, that can be a part of like how I feel about people romantically, and that can be a part of like how I feel about people like in my sexual attraction to them, or just like my emotional attraction to them. So
sure.
Yeah. I feel like, so for me it was like very much like my bisexuality was very informed by my gender queerness, but I feel like they're both interlinked. And like it's like where's the meetups? We need some bi-trans meetups. We need some bi-trans solidarity, because like there's not enough of that going on. And it's like we're both groups of people who are clearly like pushing against the grain on gender. Because to be bi is to push against the grain on gender. And I'm sorry if
that's a good point.
But like it is like you are pushing against society's view of gender and what it's supposed to mean if you're bi. Like that's just a part of it. So like there needs to be some like, hello, let's link up, you know. Like let's
and bi people, trans people, and bi trans people have literally been at the front of so much, you know, in terms of like resistance movements in the queer community since like forever. And it's wild to me how that can be true, but you never hear much about any of that unless it's like one or two, you know, people that it's like, you know, every Pride Month, you know, you get a couple of people that are like, yeah, let's remember the B and the T exist. And then the rest of the year, it's like, what do we need them for anyway? And it's like, you would all be lost without us. Shut up.
That is absolutely true. And, you know, it's interesting what you were talking about, Smalls. It was a big reason why I did my Bi Memes campaign during this past Pride Month, So during the pandemic, I would come across a lot of great bisexual memes. So I would just save them. And then I decided, I've got enough that I can probably do one for every day of Pride Month. And so I, tagged them bi memes on Instagram, and it actually really took off. People were really responsive to them because it challenges so many stereotypes. It challenges gender binaries. It challenges this idea that there's a demarcation between gender and sexuality, when for many of us, that's not the case. So, Margaret, did you have it?
I just wanted to, I think I really kind of already answered this question, but I wanted to share with you that when you were doing that series of bi memes, I was one of the people who was following it. And I had all these other people who I know who are bi or pan or whatever. And I would like send them to them periodically because I'd be like, oh, this one's too good to miss. And I don't know, it was just so refreshing to kind of see that being visibly celebrated as part of Pride, because I've also kind of never really felt like I fit in the queer community. And so it was kind of, I don't know, I'm feeling like that's breaking down a little bit more now as we're just kind of starting to be more vocal about questioning gender. And I think the internet has allowed people to be more educated about that. And so that's really awesome. But I also thought that you made a really cool contribution.
Thank you so much.
The same, like that was awesome.
Oh, no, yeah.
I just want to say that like it made my Pride Month was so much brighter. Like my Pride Month, like my Pride Month kind of started really strong, and then it started to kind of get bad, and then like every time I was seeing the meme, I was like, oh,
You got jokes. Yeah. And that is a thing too. That is such a like humor like that is such a community building tool that I think people don't take advantage of enough. There's a vast difference between other people making fun of you and you making fun of yourself and
Sure.
your friends and all, like, because we all like share this thing. So yeah, like that's like and every time you posted one that I felt like super cool. I was like, yeah, I already had that one. And no, I will say the internet is both a magical, it's a beautiful magical cesspool of amazing and garbage. Like it runs the entire gamut. And like I mean, not just in the very obvious sense, but like I have lovingly referred to a lot of people as kind of terminally online when it comes to like the discourse, because the thing is like there's so much, there can be so much gatekeeping and nitpicking and over semantics and specific language use, and whether or not certain words or certain definitions or whatever are acceptable, that you don't necessarily run into in the wild when you're actually like hanging around queer people in a physical space. You don't get that self-righteous about stuff, because you are just kind of basking in the like it's one of us like so I say that as someone who is a huge proponent of the internet as an information tool, because like I said, I grew up like super rural. We didn't even get internet until I'll put it this way. I lived and have like grown up in suburban Mississippi, right outside of Jackson. And in 1999, when we moved here, we could see McDonald's from like the apartment we were in. So we were like, oh, we're in the city now. And I didn't have access to a lot of information prior to that. And I think, I think also there is something to be said about, a lot of the younger generation just, they're not really, X, Y, and Z. They're just, saying all this stuff and they're making stuff up. Well, first of all words are made up. That's how language works. Slow down. But also like these people are not taking into context like the the way the internet has changed how we, give and receive information and how we communicate with one another. And yeah, it has allowed for a very rapid expansion of, vocabulary in a lot of marginalized communities where we didn't necessarily have that before. We had zines and we had, phone trees, but that's very different than, a Facebook group or a Tumblr blog.
Right.
It's a lot easier now to, and in some ways it's a lot harder because, then you get bombarded with a lot of information and you don't know, what all to look at because it's all just so much all the time. But that's better than having nothing.
Well, and it allows people in marginalized communities to organize and share ideas in ways that were just completely impossible. But as you said, that filtering is still necessary. And I think that's what trips up a lot of our folks who get, dragged into less healthy online spaces, is that they fail to do that initial sort of, or they don't have the knowledge to do that filtering.
Yeah.
So a lot of really great points just came up. Number one, we highlighted what it's like when you don't have access to the internet. I wanted to just highlight the fact that Prince George's County Memorial Library system now has online to go, which is a Chromebook lending. We will soon have that at all of our branches. They are Wi-Fi enabled. So yes, you can get on the internet. That being said, if you are a teen watching this, you want to be mindful of the spaces that you go to. You want to feel accepted and find people who are like-minded, but you want to remember to protect yourself because you are in a space often with adults. Again, we also have a safe space on our Discord and a Pride channel on our Discord server, which you can find by going to pgcmls.info/teens and clicking on the Discord icon. And yeah, you can come there, and there's plenty of queer and super ally librarians there to support you, as well as other people and allies. Thank you. That was a really wonderful conversation. And the last thing I would like to say that I think Margaret brought up, it's very obvious that all four of us are white presenting. And there are so many intersexual communities in the queer community, but particularly for bisexuals as well. We may not see ourselves in the media as explicitly as we'd like. Usually people get sort of retconned into, oh, by the way, they're bi. It's like, oh, yay, that's great. So we'd love to see obviously more of that. I think Loki was a good start, in terms of I'm going to be out there and saying things, and I'm not necessarily going to put a stamp on something. But for all of you out there who are listening and hearing us tell these stories of how we found queer communities and that helped us to understand ourselves better, you too, can experience that. Even if you feel like you're kind of alone now, we do have online spaces that are safe for you. And then many of you, when you go to college or you get involved in the workforce, are going to find more people like you. So just hang in there, because it does get better. I would just love it if, since we have 3 librarians in the panel and a person who's a library enthusiast, in our closing remarks, I'd love for us to just say, why libraries have been supportive of our queerness. We'll start with Margaret.
So I actually was first exposed to the idea of homosexuality at all through reading and books, and it was presented. It was Mercedes Lackey. She writes these fantasy novels with LGBTQ characters. And so it was just presented, to me, it was just another thing. Okay, cool. I was 11. I had no idea about sexuality at all. So that just was part of my initial understanding, and it was great. So I think one of the ways that libraries are so powerful is that they give us access to experiences that we don't have ourselves. And I'm seeing a lot more books coming out, especially for young people, that center LGBTQ experiences, as well as the experiences of other marginalized folks. And I just think it's really, really cool to see that visibility and to see my school librarian colleagues getting all excited about these books and buying them for their libraries and recommending them. Librarians tend to be pretty progressive, and we have a code of ethics that says that we're not allowed to judge people for their ideas. We're just here to facilitate you getting what you need. So I think it's really important for listeners to know that librarians, it's our job to be accepting and open and supportive. That's part of the AS or the ALA code of ethics, and it means that we're safe spaces, or we should be, for everybody, no matter what your gender or sexuality or identity or anything.
For sure. Thanks for that, Margaret. Smalls, what does the library mean to you in support of your queerness?
Well, much like Margaret, that was probably like my first real exposure to the queer community. You know, I would just like look at books. I was at the library a lot because my mom worked at the library. At the time, she was just like shelving books. She was like a page, and now she like works at like the desk and stuff. But like, it was like, say it was like maybe a half-hour walk from my high school, and I didn't like to take the bus because like I would get picked on a lot, and so I was just like walk, and I would just walk to the library, hang out there until she got off, and then have her cart me home so that I didn't have to ride the bus. And so I spent hours there, just hours, reading books, reading manga, get on the internet. You know, all you young folks out there don't remember AOL Instant Messenger, okay, but I do. And my name was, my handle was Bandgeek Chuck, because my nickname was Chuck. And yeah, I've been talking to my friends. I had one of my close friends growing up was actually, I'm still friends with him, gay man. So you know, I like just being able to talk to him on Instant Messenger. It wasn't exposure to queer,
right?
You know, like something as simple as that, just having access to information and books and things. And you know, after I, you know, once I went to college, it was just a continuation. I would be again like from the library at my college was amazing. I went to Truman State University in Kirksville, Missouri, which has a bad rep because it's a really hard liberal arts school, and it's bad for your mental health. But I spent a lot of time in the library there, which is bad for your mental health. But I would, you know, you know, when I had time to do things for pleasure over the breaks, you know, I would go in there and be checking out like all these like crazy, like, you know, random like artistic movies and queer books and media, just like everything, music. I mean, it just gave me like all these tools. And I think that's where I like really started to come to like understand a little bit more about like gender queerness too, because I was exploring a lot of those ideas at the library. You know, it's like nobody else is talking to me about this, so might as well crack open a book. So yeah, libraries are super important to me. I love them. I just moved to Atlanta. I just got a library card like Monday because I care about the library. I will always get a library card no matter where I move or how horrible it is to have to track down information that proves my address. Thank you.
Awesome. And Smalls, I would just like to say thank you for rocking your Old Man Joseph JoJo's Bizarre Adventure t-shirt.
Yes, here we go.
Everybody who knows me knows I'm a JoJo fanatic, and I greatly enjoy your Johnny Joestar cosplay. It is inspiring.
Thank you. I want to get some more anime instrumental things going out, some more arrangements of anime themes going out. So hopefully soon, can try to work on that.
Wonderful. That is wonderful. Kayla, did you have any closing words about how libraries have supported your queerness?
Yeah, I'm going to be kind of the odd one out here, I guess, because like I've kind of talked about growing up like in those specific rural communities, like in Oklahoma where I grew up. The only library we had was like all of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school, were all in the same, you know, like they were across the street from each other, and every grade, like even up through high school, only had like 4 teachers, like 4 classes. It was small.
Mhm.
So we only had 1 library, and it was the school library, and it closed at 3. Yeah. So I kind of, like, I learned to read early, so I ended up reading a lot of my mom's beautifully trashy romance novels, like way before I could understand certain parts of them. So like when she realized that's what I was doing, she was like, "Oh God, okay." So she would like staple certain pages together, and I'd be like, "What's this?" And she's like, "Look, like you know it's sex, but like you are genuinely not going to understand it." But she was like, "You can ask me, and I'll tell you. You're not going to get it, but like but so like I was." That's like a lot of what I read. And then when we moved here, even now in 2021, there are still a lot of major issues in public libraries here, with having openly queer content, and let alone, programs and stuff. It really kind of depends on the area and your board and the general community. But I mean,
Right.
in 2016, like I got in big trouble for even having a pride display. And by display, I mean, I had 3 stacks of books and like a rainbow sign. Like it was a mess. So in like, which I don't want to sound discouraging, because like libraries and librarians are awesome, but there are a lot of us who aren't necessarily like super progressive, and even ones who maybe don't care one way or the other, but they know, some people in the community are going to fuss about it. And, so I hear things a lot like, well, we just don't have that many people, whatever, in our community. And I'm like, you
Mhm.
do, but they just know they can't tell you about it.
That's right.
So I've
Much.
kind of become the queer librarian that I wanted to have, like growing up. like I did my when I was getting my degree, I did my capstone study on like, I studied 10 of the major like public library systems in the state, and looked at their YA collections, and looked at all of the LGBT books in their YA collections to see how intersectional they were in terms of like race and gender identity and stuff.
Cool.
And I'm able to get like the position I'm in now as the continuing education coordinator. I'm sort of a librarian for librarians, like in a way.
Okay.
And so I get to deliver that kind of information to them, and I get to do things like, readers advisory webinars on, like all these queer books that are coming out, in the first half of 2021. And like, here's ones you're going to want. And if you like those, make sure you have this one and this one and this one. So like, my library experience growing up wasn't necessarily one that was, super like noticeably supportive or helpful to me. So in that way, I'm kind of trying to do what I would have wanted done. And so like all that to say, even if you get like, the worst luck of the draw, you're gonna have, there is gonna be one queer librarian out there that's just gonna be like, like treat queer books and queer media and access to information and like, things you should rightfully have.
Right. Definitely. Well, thanks for being a leader, Kayla. This has been a wonderful conversation. There's so many great ideas, that came in here. This has just been such a robust discussion, and I really appreciate everybody's time and expertise, and just being willing to share your stories with our young viewers. To everybody out there watching, protect your peace and take up space. And if you're not ready to come out yet, that's okay. You still belong here, and you definitely belong at the library. So we will see you for our next session of Up and Out. Until then, we will see you at the library. Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks.